Nigeria's Supreme Court last week, Friday, ordered the central bank to keep old banknotes in circulation until December 31, 2023, after their removal from circulation led to cash shortages, widespread suffering, and unrest. And according to the Supreme Court, the Central Bank of Nigeria's proposal to stop accepting old bills by February 10 was unconstitutional. The yield on Nigeria's 2032 dollar bonds fell 16 basis points to 12.47% earlier on Friday, and the notes retained their gains after the ruling was announced. The central bank's project to replace 200, 500, and 1,000 naira notes that started on December 15 has disrupted everyday life in Africa's most populous nation, where only 60% of households have access to a bank account because of a shortage of new bills. A further proof that many are still unbanked, and a reality that has been predominated in parts of the country. Now, private sector activity last month contracted for the first time in almost 3 years as companies reduced output and cut jobs because of this particular scarcity. Replacement banknotes have been in short supply, which has caused chaotic scenes at banks and ATM points, adding to the already boiling frustrations with high inflation and full shortages also on the fringes. It has also overwhelmed the digital banking network as a flood of transactions shifted into cyberspace. So to look at all of this, I have Mukhtar Mohammed, who is the financial analyst and CEO of Ashare Dynamic Solution. He's joining me this morning to help us make sense of the Nigerian Apex Bank's cashless policy. Thank you so much, Mukhtar, for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, so we'll start this way. Looking at the Naira redesign policy and, of course, the currency swap, would you say that it has achieved any objective at all? And, of course, would you say it is worth it or it is ill-conceived?
Well, it's what I know is the objective. If you are looking at an objective, then you need to look at a broader view of it. You need to look at the short term or the long term. But when you're looking at the short term now, the only objective that I can see from where I'm sitting now is maybe we've not seen the exchange rate fly like it used to fly before. Maybe before this redesigning came into being, we had the exchange rate about almost hitting 900. But now it has stayed at 750. So for me, that was that's the only positive. In terms of inflation, last month we saw inflation figure goes up. This month we're not expecting inflation figure to come down. Also, you have to look at the sufferings of the ordinary Nigeria. It has been, it is a good policy, but I think it's ill planned, not ill conceived. Ill conceived is that you didn't know, but I just think the implementation was the major challenge. But the cashless policy is the way to go. Globally, that's what is obtained. But I think in terms of execution of this plan, I leave much to be desired.
All right, looking at the Supreme Court's verdict retaining the use of the 200 naira, 500 naira, 1,000 naira denominations, saying that they should still remain as legal tenders. What do you make of the decision by the Supreme Court? Would you say that it actually considered all the modalities and all the issues associated with that particular issue, as it were, before coming out with a verdict?
I think they did. If you look at the time span it took them to come to a decision, I want to think they did. But again, that judgment is not just all about the Naira redesign. They also went as far as saying that the CBN does not have a right to impose fine on people for their own money. It's only the law court that have a right to do that. And so that, again, is another area that nobody is looking at, even after this cashless policies in stream. You don't force me to be cashless. Remember that when you withdraw a particular amount, the CBN is going to fine you. But the court said they don't even have the power to do that. It's only the court of due decision that has the power to fine anybody when it comes to the currency, anything that has to do with fine. So definitely that is also one judgment that the Supreme Court has given, that a lot of Nigerians are not looking at it because they're just looking at the Naira redesign. Again, you need to look at who took who to court. In the mention of that judgment, I think the only time they make the judgment, and the CBN was not part of it, it was the state government and the federal government. And so it's not left for the federal government to give the instruction to CBN and say, look, we've gone to court and this is the decision that has been taken. We have to abide by it. You need to bring out the old note and then let it work hand in hand with the new notes. But there is a challenge now. If you are bringing the old notes, are you bringing the old notes that are out of circulation that we have tried to use to control inflation? Or are you going to print more old notes and then print new notes? These are the challenges that I think the CBN may be looking at. And again, remember that Mr. President have also come out to say, look, the 200 naira note also, the old 200 naira note and the new 200 naira note will work hand in hand. But as it stands now, since that decision was made, you rarely see the new 200 naira note any longer, or you see the old naira note of a 200 naira. So definitely, there's a lot of technicality involved in trying to resolve this issue, which I think the CBN are working on.
Well, as it were, even the old Naira notes and the new Naira notes are yet to be fully in circulation, and that's a major concern. But then, according to reports, looking at how it is affecting the private sector, it was said to have contracted for the first time in about 3 years, because we had companies who had to cut down on jobs and their output was debilitated to a large extent. So what does that make of Nigeria's economy and revenue flow, owing to the fact that Nigeria is a country that is heavily dependent on revenue to run government activities, and of course the fact that this particular issue is causing a whole lot of backlog in terms of payments and all that. So what do you make of the cash flow as regards this problem?
You must know that the informal sector is the largest driver of the Nigerian economy, and the informal sector is largely driven by cash transaction. And so definitely that's why you are seeing those impacts, because even the formal sector still also depend on the informal sector for a lot of goods or services. Just giving an example, remember when INEC was about conducting the presidential election, they had to go directly talk to CBN and say some of our vendors are cash driven, we have to pay them in cash. Even those that are household staff also need to be paid in cash. That's how much you see the synergy between the formal sector and the informal sector. But largely the informal sector is driven by cash. And so we've seen a lot of job loss in the informal sectors, especially small businesses. They are folding up because they are not able to get cash, also either to get product or to receive payment from their clients. So definitely that will definitely at the end of the day affect our revenue. But then again, one area that nobody's looking at is that the cash policy also is going to might end up driving up government revenue too, because any transaction you do online, you have to pay the 10% VAT. And so definitely it also might also improve government revenue going forward. But in the short term, government revenue might be improving, but businesses are going to be shutting down because a lot of businesses cannot make the transition from a cash to cashless policy, especially in the informal sector, and that also have to do with infrastructure. Because the problem is that we are not only just looking at cashless policy, we are looking, do we have the infrastructure to accommodate up to 50 to 60 million Nigerians that will want to do a transaction at a particular time? For me, that's the major challenge that the banks are facing. But to look at it holistically, it will definitely have a damaging effect on the Nigerian economy, especially the informal sector that is largely driven by cash.
All right. Well, some have argued that the CBN governor, the Supreme Court's ruling actually violates the statutory role of the CBN. But in other climate, some other people are saying that because the CBN is an organ of government, so its activities should be binding on what the Supreme Court says in terms of judgment. So I'm asking the question, which particular ruling should supersede the other?
Supreme is supreme. It's like God judgment on man, and you say man wants to appeal against God's judgment. It will only take the mercy of God. So definitely supreme is supreme. That's why they are called Supreme Court. They are the God of the country. Once they give judgment, even the president is bound to accept the judgment from the Supreme Court. So supreme is supreme. Now, when you talk about the act, ordinarily, the act in terms of monetary policy separate the CBN from such a judgment. But when you look at the act going further, you look at the currency area, then you see that the CBN cannot just wake up in the morning and do redenomination of the currency or redesign of the currency without getting approval from the federal, from the presidency. which happen to be the federal government. So that is where this also have to come and again, the current CBN government has not given justice to the independency of the CBN, in the fact that every decision as regards this currency swap or currency redesignation have to get the approval of Mr. President. And the CBN governor always come out to say, I appeal to Mr. President, I appeal to Mr. President, I appeal to Mr. President. So there's no more that independency of the CBN, especially with this administration. If you go further again, remember the CBN have also borrowed the federal government way above the means, the way that through the means and the way above what they're supposed to give. That tells you that the independence of the CBN, especially in the current dispensation under the able leadership of Governor Emefiele, has not really taken control of its independence, especially in areas that has to do with key decisions on monetary, on key decisions on the economy. But the monetary policy side, you can argue that they've had their independence because the MPC has not come to complain about any decision. So that's why people are saying, look, the currency swap is also a monetary policy decision that has to deal with numbers of currency, amount of currency in circulation, because that is also a tool that the CBN used to manage inflation. So you could say that, but again, the Act did not exclusively give the CBN right to do currency redesignation without seeking approval from the presidency. So that is why I think this judgment is somehow correct, because the presidency in turn will now have to tell CBN that, look, we are agreeing, we are going to abide by this judgment, and CBN in turn will now inform the banks that, look, based on the agreement, we are going back. But as it stands now, the federal government has kept mute, the CBN has kept mute, the banks are only using their own initiatives to do what they are doing to reduce the amount of sufferings of ordinary Nigerians. It's not because the CBN have told them to do what they are doing.
But that is okay for the federal government of Nigeria to continue to liaise with the Central Bank of Nigeria to deal with issues like this, because, of course, they're trying to save face and, of course, keep the image and keep the economy rolling. So whether or not it's having the CBN being independent, do you think it is safe to have those kind of robust communication or discussions between the both arms of government before they come out with a concrete decision?
Remember, the CBN said they've been on this for 2 years. Okay, so and then the CBN said they have made series of presentation to Mr. President. Remember that at the point, the Minister of Finance, Aisha Ahmed, said, I am not aware of the currency redesignation. I was never taken, I never knew it. Meanwhile, she has also, she's part of the board of the monetary policy. She has a representative, which is the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Finance, that is on the monetary policy committee. But he said she was not. But then at that time, Mr. President was outside the shore of this country. And when Mr. President, I think Mr. President was in the UK, Mr. President came out within 24 hours to say, I'm aware of the decision, I supported it, I agree with it. So definitely that means there has been a synergy between the CBN and maybe not the federal government, because if you are talking about the federal government, maybe the Minister of Finance would have been involved, and the presidency. And if you look at the thought of Malam Nasiru El-Rufai, the governor of Kaduna State, and Ganduje, the governor of Kano State, you realize they keep saying that some few individuals are the ones that are making this collective decision for Nigeria. So definitely that means the presidency is aware, but how the presidency went about it, I think that's why we are having the challenges we are having now.
All right. There's been a bit of speculation in some quarters that the redesigned policy of the Central Bank of Nigeria and the Supreme Court's eventual ruling has a political undertone. Of course, you will recall that the Central Bank of Nigeria had been talking about policy redesign, cashless policy, before the elections came. And the Supreme Court's verdict came after the presidential elections. So is there some sort of political coloration to these policies and, of course, the verdicts?
I want to tell you something is you don't play politics with your economy, you don't play politics with your security. And when you start playing politics with your security, what you are seeing outside is what is happening. That's what is going to happen. And so that's why you are seeing a lot of Nigerians suffering, because there's a political undertone to this decision. So for me, I think there's a political side. It's not well handled. And that's why we are going through the suffering we are suffering now. In any country that wants to move politically, also want to move economically, or to want to move security-wise, they need to remove politics from this aspect, because politics does not know whose party, economy does not know which party is involved or which party is not involved. It comes with its own fundamentals. You do this, you get this, you do that, you get this. So it's definitely going to affect everybody, whether you're PDP, whether you're SDP, whether you're APC, whether you're Labour Party, it will definitely affect you. So for me, I think whether the president has taken a political decision, from the look of things, ordinarily, you tend to believe that it was more a political decision than an economic decision.
All right, about 40% of Nigerians are unbanked, according to reports. So I'm looking at this cashless policy and the current version that it is presenting to us now. Do you think it will in any way improve financial inclusion in the country?
I think it will. It will. Something happened yesterday. I told them I was going and I needed to buy granite, and I stopped by and I asked they said, do you collect cash? He said yes, but we also have our POS terminal, and this is a very small business along the road, and they also have begun to evolve into going cashless. But to some, it is difficult to go that route because of the cost implication of it. Remember, cashless is not saying that there will not be cost implication, especially for the business owner. That's why some business owners now will tell you to pay in excess of what you are getting, because they want to use that to augment their fees that they are going to pay. So definitely, I think a lot of unbankable Nigeria find themselves in the banking space in the short term and in the long term. So we might have an improvement from those numbers.
All right, I would quickly like to take your reaction as regards what the Association of Corporate Affairs Managers of Banks said in a statement. They noted that the commitments of deposit money banks, that is DMBs, have seen Nigeria rising steadily and becoming more recognized as having arguably Africa's most advanced digital financial services industry and one of the world's top 10 real-time payment markets, as it were. So do you also align, or are you also aligning with this particular assertion by ACAM?
Definitely I am, because I said it, I think it was in your program, that the bank has gone beyond just having ATM or POS. They've gone even by you can use your face or your fingerprint to withdraw money. The banks have also gone into holding companies that have a separate company that has to do with payment processes. They are trying to develop a payment system. So they have payment companies that are developing apps, that are developing means whereby they also could benefit from the fintech. And so definitely, I think I totally agree that Nigerian banks have been doing very well in that area, and most of them will still continue to do well. It's just that the infrastructure is not there to accommodate the kind of volume that we have seen over the past 2 to 3 months because of the decision of the CBN. But outside of that, I think they have done well, and they are also trying to develop more of those technologies to help the banks thrive, especially in times like this where you could have up to 30 to 40 million Nigerians almost at the same time trying to do a transaction through the cashless policy platform. So I say they need to improve on their equipment, but thus far they've done well.
All right. Finally, before I close, Mukhtar, talking about infrastructural development as regards the cashless policy and, of course, internet banking, I'd like you to take your verdict. Do you think that the Central Bank of Nigeria can still salvage the situation, maybe with the use of fintech?
Well, they will. I think a lot of Nigerians are even using fintech by their own self. But like I told somebody, even for you to use the fintech, you need to also have an account in the bank. So the fintech are not deposit money banks, so you need to operate through the bank. So which way you need to open an account to be able to enjoy this benefit. And the fintech company are having a swell time. Their bottom line keep increasing. Even the bank that we are talking, their non-income part of the bank will keep increasing. So that's why we are saying that Nigerians should ask questions on how they can improve the economy, not just leaving it in the hands of few. What are the benefits of the cashless policy? And that is why I keep saying that the CBN has not done enough to let Nigerians see the benefit of this cashless policy.
Hello, Mukhtar.
This policy,
okay.
But implementation has been the biggest challenge thus far.
All right, thank you so much, Mukhtar, for joining this conversation. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.